Good evening, everybody. I'm talking to this. My name is Barbara Brennan, and just one administrative detail. Please silence your cell phones right now before the performance starts. Thank you. Well, as many of you may know, next year, Asbury, can you hear me? Oh, okay, great. Asbury will be celebrating its 100th anniversary. And tonight, I have the honor of introducing our guest speaker, Hal Gott. Hal runs the Heritage Lab that's located in the administrative building. He's the keeper of AMV history, stories, and a few surprises. Hal has lived here for 20 years. But that's not all. He came here and his parents were here before him. So he's not really sure how he got the job of knowing everything about Asbury, but he got it. Now, Hal has an impressive career as a health physicist, spans both industry and government. He's represented the United States on a NATO committee and served on the faculty of, what is it, Hal? Quartermaster Training Control. Command. But that's not all. He earned an international gold medal for singing Barbershop with the Alexandria Harmonizers. One of his proudest achievements was organizing and directing a high school church choir for 30 years, leading them through countless performances, including several gigs here at Asbury. Now, Hal truly exemplifies the spirit of a Renaissance man. So, ladies and gentlemen, fasten your seatbelts as Hal takes command of the time capsule that will transport us back through 100 years of Asbury's fascinating history. Please join me in giving Hal a warm welcome.
Am I live? There's always some question about that. Well, I don't know. I may want to come out with you and listen to this guy. Well, I'm not a speaker, and this is only the second time I've addressed the Keese School, and the first time I've ever addressed you here. So I think we have a live mic, two mics going at the same time here. Getting a lot of feedback. Okay, we'll go with it. If it gets bad, we'll call Jesse and say, help. First thing you got to know is I'm not a historian. At best, I'm an archivist. That's pushing the envelope a little bit. And at the worst, I'm an overpaid file clerk. So at any rate, I've been standing on the shoulders of some really fine people that have done a lot of work. And so I'm going to share with you a lot of the stuff they've done and a little of the stuff that we've done. And so you notice on the screen there's a couple of books, Asbury Methodist Village and Asbury Methodist Village Revisited. These are books that have been written by Marshall Grotenhuis, who was a resident of Diamond for a good many years and also a personal friend. And he did one heck of a job in recounting Asbury's history. So they should be a copy in every library on campus. If they aren't, talk to me and we'll see what we can fix that. There's Marshall. Good-looking guy, isn't he? He's got less hair than I have. More people that worked on this. If you look on the left, that's Harriet Renison. She lived in Trott. She was pretty much the Trott historian at the time. And over on the right-hand side with Genevieve Steele, she was over in Wallace. And these two ladies worked on cataloging and photographing all the old furniture that the residents brought in and when they came to Asbury. The first thing you got to know is that when the people originally moved to Asbury, their entry fee was their earthly belongings, and they just turned them over to Asbury, and then they became a part of the Asbury family. The gentleman in the blue shirt is the one that got me stuck with this job, Keese. He organized the Asbury Historical Society in 2006, and then in 2016, he asked me if I'd take over the project, and I made the mistake of saying yes. So here we are. The guy in the black suit, by the way, for those of you who don't recognize him, is Mayor Katz. He was the mayor of Gaithersburg in those days and spent a lot of time on campus. Okay, all these people did their work, and this was the place where they had all the artifacts, papers, and they worked pretty much out of this room, which has been cleaned up a little bit since I first saw it, but it's not exactly the pleasant place to be. So after having been stuck with this job, the last town meeting that Henry Mooring had before he left Asbury, I collared him and I said, Henry, how about giving us just a couple of those little offices upstairs that you've been renovating? And his response was, no. I said, well, thanks a lot, Henry. That really needed that. But he said, how would you like to build the room behind Jones Chapel? Well, I immediately remembered what it was from having been there a couple times. It's a beautiful facility, and it's with windows on three sides. It's independent air heating and air conditioning. It's immaculate, and it's lockable. So before he could change his mind, I said yes, and ran up to the housekeeping director, and I said, let's go get some furniture. So we went up to the third floor of the administration building, dragged down what we needed in the file cabinets and chairs, and we were off and running. So this is Epworth Hall for those of you that have not been there. We'll see a different picture of it a little bit later, but this is Epworth Hall that stands now. The four pictures that you see on the wall are the first four superintendents or executive directors. They had different titles that were working with Asbury, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Going down the hall, you'll see a whole list of pictures, so if you're interested in knowing who the executive directors over the years have been, those are their pictures, all of them right down to Michelle Potter on the end. It listed their dates of tenure. And there's the Michelle Potter's pictures right up against the post, and there's a cute story about that, but I haven't got time to tell you that tonight, but it's interesting. Through the door, you get into the Heritage Lab, and this is where we're working now, and it's a very nice place, as I described. File cabinets on this end have one drawer for every building on campus where you want to keep stuff that you don't want to lose, and this happens occasionally. So if you have any things that you want to have that will be retained for historical purposes, we have a drawer, your own special drawer for yourself. Over on the far side, we have the other file cabinets, are all of the newsletters that have been done over the years. They're missing a couple, I think, but these have all been digitized so you can see them online, or you can come in and do touchy-feely with them if you really want to see what they're like. But they're all in acid-free folders, and they've all been put so you can use them. In the middle there is our computer facility, which you can't really see, that Doug Turrell, who is not a member of Asbury, but he's a retired federal employee, came out and really has got us going. He tells me that we have about 300 gigabytes of information in the cloud that we can search once we get going, if you're interested. And over in the left-hand corner, there's a bookcases. So in it has a lot of notebooks, and in those notebooks are 4,000 slides. Well, we had them kind of mishmashed at one time, and so I went to Virginia Phillips over in the Edwards Fisher building, and I said, and she's a librarian, there's all types of library work that she's done over the years. And I said, Virginia, could you organize these things? And she said, yes. So we now have them all organized by building, by a function within that building, and it's quite something. And we can get copies of them if we want to. So big hand for Virginia Phillips. She really did a great job. Now, if you want to know about Asbury over the last 50 years, there's two people that you can ask. One would be Wayne Cleaver, and if you don't know him, he knows you. and the other one is my dentist. Oh, I'm sorry, some of you don't know my dentist. I apologize. My dentist has the clinic over here on Wednesday morning in the Wilson Healthcare Center, and he also happens to be the grandson of Herman Wilson, who started this whole operation. And so he has personal memories that are really, some of them funny, some of them very interesting. But Bob, if you happen to be in a dental chair, ask him your question before he gets his hand in your mouth, or you will have trouble getting it going. Let's have a starting point here now. We have two houses on the other side of Russell Avenue that I've been there for a long, long time, and they're right up the corner of Maryland Avenue. But I say a long, long time, that would be about the 1920s. Those are the same two houses. They've been there forever. They housed, when the farm was there, they housed the management staff for making that farm, the old Magruder Walker Farm, run. So they have been there all the time, and they were on what was soon to be, eventually to be, Russell Avenue. But one thing that we didn't know until just recently is that before Russell Avenue became Russell Avenue, it was Magruder Street. Interesting little factoid that I thought I'd throw in. Okay, on the right-hand side of this slide here, I'm sorry, I said slide, excuse me, this image. I'm old-fashioned. We'll find that the area is in 1924 was the area that the Baltimore Conference of the Methodist Episcopal Church South was going to underwrite so that for $25,000 we could buy 130 acres. Can you imagine what $25,000 would buy today? Not much. And by the way, there's a story that goes around with the South versus the North, but that's a story I'd have to tell you offline too. There's so many stories I know on this, but we really want to get out of here before morning. On the property that we bought, there was this 3-story house, and we aren't sure who occupied it before, but we do know who occupied it after Asbury was running. It was the Herman Wilson family, and I'm sorry, it was the 3-story house that was reputed to have been the first house in the Gaithersburg area to have running water and electricity. So this house had been there for quite a while, but so they proceeded and we made Asbury Methodist Village, and we made the Wilson Hall, which is the administration building now. We made that, and that's the way it looks today, pretty much. Back then, it hasn't changed. The thing was for the aged and orphans. Well, we think there wasn't any orphans, but then again, maybe there was one. And I can't go into that discussion tonight, but maybe there was an orphan. An orphan. Okay, this is Reverend J.J. Ringer. He was the pastor of the Grace Methodist Church down at the other end of Walker Avenue, and he was the superintendent for 2 years and doing double duty. I think he must have had roller skates going back and forth between his jobs. The first 5 people that moved in on April 15th, 1926. And I used these two. They were I guess they were the 3rd and 4th ones to move in, but it gave me a better picture because they have the fireplace there. These are the Robinsons. That fireplace, if you've been in the administration building and look to your right of the lobby, you've seen this fireplace. Well, cosmetically it's different, and I would imagine that back in those days it worked, and these days I'm pretty darn sure it doesn't work. So here's a list of the people that they've moved in, and as I said, 5 on the first day, and there was another half a dozen the next day. And by the time we got this list finished and people were moving into the new home, that list ran handwritten to a little over 1,800 names. Well, it would be a good idea if we could, you can't sort and do things with that, with just script. So we went to Joy Jones, who lives over in Edwards Fisher, said, Joy, how would you like to take these names and transcribe them into a spreadsheet? And she made the mistake of saying yes. So anyway, she has transcribed these all into a spreadsheet in an Excel file, and we can now sort them and start to find out who's there, what the numbers were for various years that they came in. And there's more stories behind that, but I can't go into them now. There's so many stories that I can't tell you and still get out tonight. This was the first dining room that they had. And it was some of these pictures may look a little foggy, but what you got to understand is these were glass slides that were taken way back in the early part of the 1920s and like that. There's no conventional way, we discovered, to digitize them. So that was going to be a problem. Well, we thought, what do we do? Well, we went to Dave Reiser and Jim Utterbach and said, hey guys, can you digitize these? And they went to work and they digitized dozens of these old glass slides, so we have them. As I say, the quality is weak, but that's because the original slide was weak. Well, one step further in this story I can't tell you, but Dave did some colorizing of this lady's skirt in the front row. So if you want to hear more about that, ask Dave, or you could even ask Jane because she got involved in this. There's the kitchen. It's kind of scary to look at that kitchen. And I don't mean to imply anything here, but this is the infirmary. No relationship there. That was on the third floor of the administration building, as we call it now, but on the north end. Everybody, when they came in, got a bedroom, and they got a bed and a bureau, and these were not included in the original price that they paid for the home. So these had to be underwritten, shall we say, by the individuals or churches or other groups. And so if they underwrote the furnishings for that room, they got their name on a plaque outside the door, a nice, beautiful brass plaque. And when they took the home down, they had the good sense to save these things. And we were going to send them out to get them, about 165 of them. We were going to get them photographed, and we went to pick it up, and we realized that the thing weighed over 200 pounds. So we said, well, there's got to be a way to do it easier. We have some ideas if anybody would like to get involved. It doesn't involve 200 pounds, but we would like to get them digitized. Okay, 1928, we have Herman and Lillian Wilson. And he was the financial secretary up until this time, so he didn't come in blind. He was involved in the management of the home already. And the reason Lillian Wilson is in there is because the story, I don't know if it was true or not, but they said she did the work and he got the credit. But anyway, they both worked very hard to make Asbury a success. Well, first thing Herman did is he figured, well, we're going to be expanding, so I better make a little addition to it. So he went out and they decided to make Epworth Hall. That's good. And well, this is the groundbreaking for it. And if you look at that building on the left, you'll see Sundex pretty much. Remember that. There'll be a quiz left. The next thing we have is then when he completed it, this is what Epworth Hall looks like. As you look at the building, it's on the right-hand end, down by the dog park. And so this is, that's the way it looks. Whoops. Anyway, that's the way it looks. Except today, there's a wall there where the staircase is. That's the only difference, basically. And then on the other side to the, hello. There we go. We have technical difficulties here. There we go. Get back a little. There. All right, there we have, this was the library. Sorry about that, folks. When they moved out, that library became what we are using for the Asbury Home section of the museum. We have two museums for it. We have this, and then we have the museum that has all your individual living venues to be displayed. And Bridget Zelmo is pretty well taken over the project of making this look right, and I would suggest if you get over to the administration building, take a walk all the way down to the end of the hall to Epworth Hall and make a big U-turn, and you'll see a beautiful museum that's been put together that starts from scratch over on the left-hand side with the farm, and then the next issue would be the dreamers, they call it, the people that wanted to make this thing go, right around to the Wilson days, and coming up on the right, some of the activities and facilities ahead, and it ends up on this end over on the right by going to the new home. So it's worth a look if you get down there. Next to that, they had Jones Chapel, and this was used primarily for Sunday services usually, but they did have a few things like they did theatrical performances and so on. This is one of the pictures that they had for outdoor recreation or something like that. I really can't account for it, but this is the ladies doing a maypole dance. Anybody ever seen a maypole dance? Oh, okay, good. They were doing it. So that was one of the things they did, and they also had, we find out, a wedding at the home. So that was kind of nice. Well, getting back to the beginning, they were a farm originally, and so in 1929, they decided they better have a superintendent to manage it. So Reverend A.B. Seitz, I don't know where he was from, but they appointed him as the manager of the Asbury farm until it was dissolved in the late 60s. Well, he had everything on that farm. I mean everything, absolutely everything. Well, they had a dairy, and that dairy provided dairy products to a lot of the Montgomery County residents for a good while until it was closed in 1953, and the herd was auctioned off. The whole farm was auctioned off in the 1966, I believe. Well, here's the census. Apparently, the government was running because they did have a census in 1930. It was strange because the first line, as census have it, was Herman Wilson, superintendent. Obvious. The second line was Lillian Wilson, matron. Well, it kind of gave me pause for a minute. And then you go down to the rest of them, and they're all the residents, inmates. I kid you not. Well, about 1948, they decided there was two homes up in the Westminster, Maryland area. One was the Castle House, and the other was Westminster House. If I get to talking too fast, it's only because we got to get done quick. This was the groundbreaking for Castle Hall, and I can never look at this picture without looking at that lady with the hat in the upper left-hand corner there. I may have no taste, but it just tears me up. So anyway, they had the groundbreaking for that. There we are. And this is what it looks like now. If we wander out there, Castle Hall looks like just what it is on the opposite side from Epworth Hall. And inside they had what they called Davis Lounge, beautiful place. Had a stage at one end, could be set up with tables and chairs. It was I'm going to call it the party room, if you will, but they did all sorts of fun things there. And so many of us have been there. We don't really appreciate that we've been there, but when they changed to the administration building, it became the rehab center. So where the stage was became an office, and you can see when they took the stage out, they left the molding in, and you can see that around the edges of the office of the rehab center. And they had all the other little cubicles they had. Of course, on this end, they had all the students of the McKee side that helped us out doing our rehab on this end. So in 1949, this is what it looked like from the air. Very organized. There's the Wilson's house down below, and the two wings on the Wilson Hall in the middle there, and the farm. Now we got to realize that the farm was still producing materials that the home would be using to eat. And I also heard somewhere that they did a lot of canning, which is not unusual. I know my mom did a lot of canning when we had a vegetable garden. So there you have that. Well, about this time, my television was getting in, and I don't know whether somebody donated it or whether they bought it, but here's a television room, and I don't know who remembers this, but there once upon a time was a television you had to get out of your chair and go up and turn the knob to select the station. Unbelievable. Well, as I said before, all the things that came with you to Asbury became Asbury property, but this lady had a pump organ, and that was on display down in the Williamsburg Lane for a good while. I have no idea where it is now, and the bellows would be shot, I'm sure. But anyway, this lady was using her pump organ with some friends to do some musical. And then down, when we finally figure out where this is, a gentleman doing either billiards or pool. We're not sure what the Methodist discipline allowed in those days, but he's doing it, whatever it is. It was in the area where the copy center is now, down on the main ground floor of the administration building. And then this one is sort of dear to my heart. Early on, Herman Wilson, when he first took over, made sure that all the residents had Christmas presents. Well, that went on for several years, and in 1934, the Asbury Home Guild was formed. And the Asbury Home Guild they came from all the churches in the area and solicited donations from their churches. And so they had quite a budget, but anyway, they took over this process of getting gifts ready for the residents. And this looks like it might have been in Davis Hall, one of the early things. And from that time on, this probably was one of the earliest Elves Day, if you want to call it that. So it's been around for a long, long time. And then sitting out in the front in this nice lawn swing, this is where you'd probably found me all this time, just sitting there doing nothing. Okay, I said earlier that we had the infirmary up on the third floor. In 1953, it was closed as an infirmary because they now had a new hall, a young hall that was an infirmary or hospital. They kept referring to it in different ways. Out going backwards, going to the rear of the building, where on the same end as Epworth Hall. So that was an improvement, and it was very nice, and that stayed as the Epworth Hospital, stayed as the Young Hospital or Infirmary for quite a while, up until the time that the Wilson Healthcare Center was built, about 1975. Okay, the Guild always wanted to do nice things for the residents, and this is an event that near one Christmas in 1954, they got them a plane ride from National Airport to Baltimore. Big deal. A friend of mine told me just exactly what you're thinking. It was a takeoff and a landing. Well, that may well be, but in those days you could still fly around the district. I've flown in on business and have come in at night, and the pilot would say, if you look out your left window over the wing, you'll see the lighted monuments on your left, and it was a beautiful sight. And I would imagine that they probably went up and circled around D.C. and saw the monuments, and that would have been quite an experience. Well, I mentioned before that we had a building up in Westminster House, and they decided they had to bring that down here too. So in 1955, they did some major reconstruction. They built another wing it's out of the shot on this picture, but it became the Westminster Wing. And I identify that to you by saying it's where we used to get our pharmacy and some of our doctor's appointments. Upstairs, they had a training facility for the staff and lots of conference rooms. So that was, in the old days, apartments for Westminster Hall. Well, then over on the other side, this is the dining area, and seeing how we had more people, we had to make a bigger dining room. So the Guild funded some of that construction there too. And when they finished, it was looking like this from the outside, which it very much looks like that now. So in the picture window, why the Wilsons used to have their table with their guests, and so they would be right looking out the window. And that took space, maybe 20, 30 feet from the window back in. And that remains that way today. Big table in there, but the roof, the ceiling, and the chandeliers are still there. But back of that, this is where the dining room was for the rest of the folks. Well, that dining room has now been subdivided into offices and with a drop ceiling, so you no longer can appreciate what it was before. However, there's the three little portals at the back. You notice those little entrances? Those are still there just like they were then. That's interesting. This is Ronald Wilson. Yeah. And he took over in 1955 and from his father. And one of the first things he did was he had to take over this whole thing, and I'm not going to recite that. If you were paying attention, you know what they got. We got all these wings on there now. Well, about this time, the residents decided, hey, we need to have a newsletter. So they put together a newsletter in 1956 called Chit Chat. And that newsletter carried on until into the 90s. when the home was finally closed. It was used by doing a mimeograph machine, which many of us have, I would say, fond memories, or maybe not so fond memories. But here's a copy, the first edition of the newsletter, and we have this on file in acid-free folders over in the lab, if you would ever like to get a look at it. They had 6 other newsletters that came out as the Asbury campus evolved, all of which are on file and digitized. There was a group in the home that was studying the United Nations about that time. So again, I think the Guild underwrote a flight to New York, but here they are. They went out of National, but before they went, they had a reception with Eddie Rickenbacker, who was the CEO or president, I'm not sure what he would be, of Eastern Airlines. And so he hosted them before they got on one of his airplanes and off to New York. And, well, let's see. There we are. There's the United Nations. And there's we are, the typical tourist picture. Hey, we're here, folks. Okay, we had three kinds of pictures, basically. We had pictures that people had written on the back of, the name, the date, month, day, and year. Wonderful. You couldn't ask for more. Well, that was good, but then we had also some pictures that had nothing on it. That was a little frustrating. But even more frustrating were the pictures that they had written on the back, May 13th. You live with it. But sometimes we could do a little detective work. I don't know how many of you are acquainted with the term the WAG and SWAGs. That must have been where I worked. It was a scientific wild-ass guess. Okay, there we go. And so this picture was probably one of those we couldn't identify, but a friend of mine was looking at it when it was a little bit larger, and he says, Hal, those 2 cars up there are one's a 1958 Pontiac, and the one behind us is a 1958 Chevy. And I took a closer look at it, and I said, my gosh, so it is. I used to own one of those 1958 Chevys. So we figured this probably was about 1959. Now here's some ladies in their nice little sunrooms. Remember that. Here we have a picture of a few things that were happening there. The top one is just a line, and that was an airstrip, and it had been plowed out by the associate director and his brother. Excuse me, the executive director, Ronald, and his brother, Robert. And we still have the receipts for all the earth moving equipment. And they plowed a runway right down to the cornfield. Well, that was pretty good. FAA said, hey, that's no problem with us. The plane was housed over at Laytonsville. And everything was fine for about 6 months. And all of a sudden, there's probably neighbors who are complaining, all of a sudden, the county came in and said, whoa, you're not zoned for that. Cease and desist or there will be fines. We ceased and desisted. It was the only thing we could do. But the plane had been used just to look over the 130 acres, and there was no other way to get back into that area without using an airplane. It was convenient, let's put it that way. So anyway, we did away with that. Down below that, you have a little triangle. Well, this is a 3-hole executive golf course. To the left of the triangle would be just about where they had would have been the Wilson Healthcare Center, and this is only 1964, by the way, so that's the first tee. Second tee was down by the pond, and the third tee was up by where the maintenance sheds are. I have no idea what par was, I have no idea what the fairways were like, and heaven knows what the greens were like. But anyway, my dentist used to play golf occasionally with his grandfather on this course, so we know it was there. But we know it had to be taken out before 1975, because that's when the Wilson Healthcare Center went in. Okay. The county had a problem with us with airplanes, but the Guild, again, thought it might be interesting to give the helicopter rides to people. So I have the feeling that they brought the helicopters in, and everybody had a ride, and they got them out of there before the county could even see what was going on. But it probably was a good experience. Okay, Williamsburg Lane is being developed. And if you've been to Williamsburg Lane, on the right-hand side as you come in from the door, you see these little signs like the, I'm pointing at the thing. It's the signs thing what the various shops are. This one was a china shop, and I'm reasonably certain that it was not for sale. I think the ladies that came in gave some of their patterns and donated them there. So that became a display, a mini museum. And then we have the doll collection. And this doll collection, there's a video, about 14 minutes, that talks exclusively to this and how the Williamsburg Lane was expanded. So that's available if you want it. Many things you can get, all you have to do is ask. There's some of these dolls there they say are absolutely priceless. I never played with dolls, so I don't really appreciate whether they're priceless or not. I was supposed to bring a laugh. Oh, okay. Across, in that same era, across from the clothes closet, we had an ice cream parlor. And that, to me, would have been really nice. And the view out those bay windows there was right onto the lawn, where the helicopter had come down to give rides. And it was fairly well used. I've got pictures with it, much more crowded, but this one I thought gave the image of what the ice cream parlor was like. And then we have a mystery. We had a post office. We had our own postmark, and you can see the little windows of the little boxes behind the ladies there. And at one Christmas, they say, we processed more than 1,000 pieces of mail. So it was a busy place. It was over on the same side as the Williamsburg clothes closet. But when it closed up, it went over, and they took the facade and moved it over across the way to the area where now it's called the staff break room on that far wall. And you can still see it. Excuse me, I'm going to squat for a minute. So if anybody knows anything about this post office, when it went in and when it didn't, please let us know. We're looking for all sorts of information that we can do. And by the way, if I make a mistake, I would like to know that too, if we got something wrong. Every once in a while we found it. Okay, here's the lighthouse, if you want to call it that, on top of the on top of the Asbury home. And there's a story about the executive director and his brother going up there and exploring. That light could be seen around for miles, they say, around the county. But the story of the two guys going up in there to explore is hilarious, but there's not time to tell it right now. Some of these are pretty good. Okay, at this point it was decided that they should expand their reach, and they decided in 1970 that they would start going with independent living facilities. So they tried it in 1971. They built Trot, and that stake right there is probably about the corner of apartment 104 in the Trot building. But if you look behind those numbers, it's just nothing's out there. This is still farm country. And there's Norman Trot. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, he was the president of the Wesley Seminary down at American University at that time. And well, everybody knows what that is. That's Trot or any of the other buildings. Since it was a new endeavor, they decided to have its own administrator. And so they hired, let's see, that was Hal Wells. He was a retired Air Force officer. And he worked with the management of the home, the Trot business. And between them, I'm going to say plowed new ground. It's sort of an interesting analogy in this concept that they had out there. Hello.
Hello, I'm giving you water.
Oh. Thank you. Well, anyway, this was the Trot lobby in those days. Anybody that's been in the Trot knows that this is nothing like what we have today. But this was all we had. So we had the communications there, we had the mail, everything came in through there, but that was Trot. And then we had someplace to eat, so we ate downstairs in what is now known as Conley Hall. And I have been told, I'm going to stand up because that feedback seems to be giving me a problem. That's better? Okay. They tell me that seated 85 people. I have been in Conley Hall many, many times, and I have a problem with that number, but I don't know who to argue with. Behind Conley Hall, there was an industrial kitchen that supported that, commercial kitchen, excuse me. Beyond that, there was behind that, whoops, excuse me. Okay. Bear with me here. Well, there's a shop in the back. There we go. The gentleman on the left is Reverend Paul Conley, retired, and that's who they named the Conley Hall after. His wife, I knew her when we were there, and she said, they didn't name it after me, they named it after my husband. So that's where Conley got his name. The gentleman on the right is Stabler Freeland, and we'll talk about him in just a moment. On top of Trot, this is unique because it was about a 50 by 50 patio, for want of a better term. It's there to this day, and it's well used, but it's really well used on the 4th of July by people going up there to watch the fireworks. Now, here's Stabler Freeland. I said we talk about him, and with his wife, Lucy. There's another rather humorous story about Lucy, but we can't tell that now. That Stabler was a farmer. And so the area down by where the courtyards stand now was open fields. So he had it plotted off, and you could get a plot, a half plot, a quarter plot, and grow whatever you wanted to, flowers, whatever. My wife grew tomatoes, and that's a story which has to be told somewhere else too. Stabler was so well respected that when he passed, they put up this little artifact. It's a monument, I don't know what you want to call it. It says the Stabler Freeland Memorial Gardens, and it was the West Gardens of what they had up there at that time. So if anybody knows where any of these things are, sometimes they get stuck away in some of the cages. Do let us know, because we'd like to honor them. Okay, about this time, 1975, they said, well, you know, that young hall we have down there, the infirmary or whatever you want to call it, is really not cutting the mustard. We really ought to have something a little more sophisticated. So they put the first phase of the Wilson Healthcare Center. This is the cornerstone laying. I do have the names of all these people if you want to know what they are. See me outside. And this was artist conception. And it's probably one of the first nurses' stations. And this is Inez Perry. We actually know her name. She was the, that gets squished a little bit too. She was the first nurse in charge of the nursing there. All right, we have in the Wilson Healthcare Center, very nice chapel, very small. I took my youth choir over there a few times, but that's stories that have to be told offline. When they remodeled it, just pre-COVID, they had to take this all out, and rather than destroy the stained glass, they took it and put it downstairs on the walkway that goes into the Ebinger Chapel, if you're acquainted with that. It was a very nice use for it, and it was very, very well done. Well, they had another thing that we don't have now, and that was the Asbury Volunteer Corps. You see if you get it right. And from what I can tell, it basically was a morale thing, helping residents with things that the nursing didn't include. Here's somebody passing out ice cream. That certainly helped the morale. I had a friend that would go in and play guitars with some of the residents there at Wilson. Well, you have to eat. So it was determined that they could have a cafeteria downstairs. Well, it's necessary that it had the cafeteria downstairs because there was no other eateries in the area. And this cafeteria that did that also supported the residents of Wilson. Well, that stayed that way until they put the Kinley building in. And at that time, the whole cafeteria and the people at the kitchen that sponsored it, they were all moved down to Russell Avenue Cafe. And that kitchen now is a huge kitchen. I've not been in it, I've seen pictures, but it now supports the food for Kinley, food for Wilson Healthcare Center, as well as the food for the Russell Avenue Cafe. Okay, we had a success with the Trot Building, so let's build ourselves another one. Trot Building, by the way, was 110 residents. And here we've got Edwards Fisher Building, and it was opened in February of 1977 with another 110 people. And I should say at this point that there was a year's waiting list for each of these homes. And by the independent living, they really meant independent living. If you had a cane, you were not eligible to go in. You could grow into it, obviously, but it was independent to the nth. Okay, back myself up a little bit if I can. I'm using a different clicker than I'm used to. Okay. Oh, there we are. Okay, there's Edwards Fisher, Philip Edwards and Lloyd Fisher. And there's a plaque there that we would like to get a hold of too. There's so many things that just wander about and get lost. So if we find something, we'd like to get it and save it for posterity. Well, we still didn't solve the problem of eating, did we? We have 220 people now in that little dining room, and it takes 85, maybe. What do? There's a lot of stories about that, none of which I will tell now, but the most credible one was that the Edward Fisher would eat at noon, and the Trot Building people would eat in the evening. It makes sense. I mean, it must have been a reservation system of some sort. But they did have the foresight to think ahead and say, "Hey, we got to take care of this." So they built an apartment center. Well, the apartment center is as is now, but it was finished about 6 or 8 months after Edwards Fisher was opened. So there was a little delay where people had to gang up on that other dining room. Well, one of the things that they had in the apartment center, and the people I ate with tonight at dinner, I was going to tell them about it, but we were sitting on the porch. Well, in the earliest days, that porch was open, and you sat out there and enjoyed the weather. It was beautiful. They had the corridors that ran between buildings, but the difference was, you notice those are glass tops, and I would presume that in the summertime, the sun coming down through there really would make you warm. They also had, and so those have been taken off, and we now have drop ceilings, and that everything is taken care of. On the floor, you'll see there's brick, and those bricks are probably the same kind of bricks that they have in the Williamsburg Lane, but they covered them over with carpet now, so that's what we have now. Whoops! Oh my! Oh. No, sorry about this, folks, but this clicker is. There we go. Okay, there's the first servings. There's when it opened up, and they cut the ribbon, and we're in. And this is the plaque as you walk in it. You can find it over on the right-hand side that says this is the Stuart B. Crawford dining room. And there's the first serving staff in the Crawford dining room. Very different than we have now, but they were probably a professional crew, maybe. The one forward here. Now there's one of the earlier pictures of the Crawford dining room. Now, if you look to the top of the screen, to the left, I think pretty much, you'll see a big window. Well, that is just what it is. It's a window, and there's a couple of them back there. And those windows looked out on the porch where people were sitting enjoying the weather. Well, that was good up to a point, but then they had to have more space. So they kicked out the windows, put places where you could pass through, and at that point, they enclosed the porch. And so, fortunately, when we had dinner over there tonight, we were not out in the outside, we were in on the porch. But it carries the name, and when you click in at the podium, they say your table would be number 47 on the porch. So it retained the name, which I think is kind of cool. Okay. Downstairs, we had the Robert Parker Hall, and that has been used for a number of things, meetings, ice cream socials, and for a good while, the Keese School had their Thursday night sessions there. I don't know how many of you remember those sessions that they had, but there was that was one of the places they were. I like this better. And also, you notice on the floor there's a little shuffleboard thing. Well, if it was nothing used for anything else, you could go down and play shuffleboard. And I know that they had it because I lost a lot of shuffleboard games down there. Oh well, they built another one then, which was Mund, and this was 1980. And I apologize for the picture. You're never supposed to apologize, but I do. It was 1980. It's probably the dedication. This is the band in the back. I imagine the dignitaries are up front. And this became the Mund Building. And here's Alan Mund. I had never seen a picture of him until I started working on this, but it was kind of nice we found it. Well, a couple of things that made Mund different was very soon after it was put into use, they put in the bargain mart. Anybody ever heard of the bargain mart? So that was very small at this time. I noticed there's 3 umbrellas or something like that in the back. They must have had a good day. Well, then of course, oh my, don't do that to me. Is this coming up full screen on the screen up there? No. Jesse? Yeah. Well, we'll just proceed with this. That was going all the way back to the beginning. This is a disaster.
So it's not a disaster because it's just about time for you to take some questions anyway.
Oh, my goodness. Sorry about that. I must have told too many stories. Oh, there we are.
So maybe, just a little bit more.
Okay, just a little bit more. No stories. This is the beauty shop, and I have contentious with this because every time I'm going to get a haircut, I'm no more beautiful when I come out than when I went in. So at this point, we now have what they call Heritage Square. Heritage Square was put in, named, if you will, in 2006 by a director of marketing at an all-hands meeting. And the name he gave it was Heritage Square, and it stuck. Now, you notice the symmetry of these buildings is they're not symmetrical. I'll tell you about that offline, too. Okay, then we're really almost done. The old home was having its problems. They had a fire on the 3rd floor, and there was nobody got killed, but there was enough smoke inhalation. They had to take them to the hospital. And so that plus a few other things in the state saying, hey, you got to stop. We made a new building. So this is the breaking ground for the new building. And here's a couple of executives over there. There we are. Okay. This is, okay, I'm not going to fight it the rest of the way. They put it into the new home, and the various things that are different about the new home from the old home is that they had the pond out there in the back was stocked with fish, and the folks could go out there and fish, and that was a very popular place to go. They had a couple of paddle boats. I know they were there because I saw 2 of them at least when I'd visit my dad, and he was there. And then they had a chapel associated with it, full of stained glass, and that was when they had to take it down. And this is the important part. Don't want to miss this now. Take notes. The home was taken down to the steel and the concrete. It was a frame. That was the home for about 3 years. It was not there. So people often say Parkview is just a remodeling of the home. No, the frame was there, but it was nothing for about 3 years. And then that pretty much covers the rest of what I wanted to say. I can't see you standing up, but I'm pretty sure you're standing up. Thank you.
Hal, that was
Can I go home now?
Yeah, no, you can sit down here, wait. That was so much fun and really so interesting. And I know there's a sequel to this, so, and many stories.
Oh, the stories were just...
So there's a wonderful handout that Hal prepared, which is waiting for you as you leave the room. It's out on the tables out there. I think there's enough for everyone here. Although this is a really nice big crowd, it's good to see you all here.
And let me make one comment about that handout. If any of you find that